Welcome to the Erotic Realm podcast, where we explore the psychology of darker desires. I'm Em, and if you're new here, welcome. I'm a psychosexuality nerd with a background in psychology, sociology, medical science, and Tantra. I'm also in a 24/7 collared relationship, and I created this podcast with the mission of humanizing kinksters. Join me here for one-on-one, in-depth conversations as we explore the fascinating world of eroticism, one erotic realm at a time. If you love what we're doing here in the Erotic Realm, I'd like to ask you a quick favour. Can you follow and rate the show wherever you listen? It helps the show reach more people like you. And if you haven't yet, I'd love if you could subscribe to my Substack, Psychology of Desire. This is where I go even deeper into the science and symbolism of desire, archetypes, and erotic evolution. You'll get access to articles, unique surveys and research, and behind-the-scenes access to everything I'm building. Simply visit psychologyofdesire.substack.com. I'll see you there. And now, for today's episode. Last week, we explored the feminist submissive, a theme that emerged across Season 1 where women spoke about yielding power, not as weakness, but as a conscious, embodied act of agency. This episode continues the gendered inquiry, but it turns its focus to men. Across the first year of the Erotic Realm, male guests returned again and again to a quiet but urgent tension: how to relate to power without reproducing harm, and how to be vulnerable without being diminished. Some spoke as dominance, questioning inherited models of authority. Others spoke as submissive men, grappling with a culture that equates male surrender, devotion, or emotional exposure with weakness. What emerged was not a split, but a shared project, the redefinition of masculinity itself. Men across the season described dominance not as entitlement, but as responsibility. Submission not as failure, but as devotion. And vulnerability not as collapse, but as depth. They challenged reductive ideas of masculinity, from performative toughness to red pill ideologies, and articulated something more demanding: erotic leadership grounded in integrity, presence, and care. If women across the season sought freedom through yielding, men sought meaning through wielding, and through learning when to kneel, feel, and offer themselves in service. This episode explores masculinity not as a fixed role, but as an evolving relationship to power, one that includes dominance, surrender, and courage to be seen. Enjoy. You mentioned earlier about exploring yourself as a cis man. I'd love to go into that more. So growing up, what messages did you receive about masculinity, and when did you start to question or redefine them?
I grew up primarily with my mother. My parents were split when I was about 9 or 10. And I don't think I really had particularly fully present male role models in many ways. I have a good relationship with my father, but it was a sort of a weekend visitation thing.
Right.
And then by the time my stepfather came into my life, I was already a teenager and was fairly independent. So I wouldn't say my stepfather was terribly much of a sort of like a masculine or father role model in that way. So I don't think I really did think about it. That's not to say I didn't get the messaging. I think there was a lot of messaging I got sort of at a standard societal level, particularly around some early unrelated trauma about from an accident I was involved in, basically, where I got the sort of standard, men don't talk about their feelings, and it didn't seem quite right to me, but it also, I subconsciously found it hard to connect. To discuss those things. So I think I got sort of like if you want, the standard Western script, but at a distance. It's only been in the last 5 or 6 years, I'd say, that I've actually thought of gender and masculinity as part of my identity quite deliberately. And that's partially come from some personal struggles where I've noticed that some of those things have been manifesting. You know, the that standard, like, men don't talk about their feelings. Actually, I've got some feelings and I want to talk about them. What does that mean? How am I going to go about doing that? Why don't I know how to do this? That those kinds of questionings become more and more prominent. The other thing is, as I said, I'm broadly in a space where I'm more connected to the sort of social and political discourse, as it were, professionally, but also, you know, in the current kind of cultural zeitgeist, particularly when you're involved in alternative communities, there is a real shift up, I think, in terms of what we're actually accepting in our standard societal scripts. And there's a lot of toxic elements to traditional conceptions of masculinity around power and control, particularly in relationships and particularly in heterosexual relationships, and men's control over women or attempts to control women, that are rightfully changing. Where I think that becomes a bit tricky for me as a cis man, not as a heterosexual man, but as a cis man, is that there isn't a really good script of how, or a really good even guideline of how to be a good man. And I mean both of those in capital letters. We've got a lot of discussions at the moment around the toxic elements of traditional masculinity, and very rightly so. We've got a lot of discussions from feminist scholarship, from active feminist advocates and movers and shakers in the fourth generation now or fourth wave of feminism that's sweeping through sort of our societal discourses. What's absent in this sort of gender studies space is a masculine articulation of a positive masculinity. And that, I think, is something that I'm trying to deliberately write and rewrite for myself at the moment. It's quite tricky though, because you don't have, you know, this is the really pointy end of men don't talk about their feelings. It turns out even at a scholarly level, there's not a lot of literature on this. And a lot of the literature that's on it is focusing on the toxic elements of masculinity. And quite disturbingly, actually, some of the stuff that I've come across, even when I've been trying to research this academically, even when it purports to put forward something like that, often you find that there's actually the literature then devolves back into don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other, not be this. And that, I think, is really tricky because there's no positive narrative to lift people up. I'm a firm believer in lifting people up rather than putting people down. So that's that's where that kind of journey is at the moment. I'm sorry, it's a bit diffuse. I'm still working through it. But
No, I really agree with you. I really feel the same. I've been looking for the same definition too and been finding it difficult to find. We really need more healthy representations of how to be a man. So I'm going to ask you, how would you define healthy masculinity if you had to right now? What should men do?
yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are firmly masculine traits. And I want to sort of like put a little bit of a disconnect here. What I'm going to be talking about is expressions of masculinity. Now, that doesn't need to be and shouldn't be confined to cis men. What I want to talk about here is like a representation of the masculine as opposed to the feminine, and identify those as sort of, I don't even think a linear spectrum is really useful here. I'm sorry, I'm now dropping into an academic mindset a little bit.
Go for it.
But if we're thinking about like traits and patterns of behavior and things that are positively masculine, you know, I know a lot of women, self-identifying women, and non-binaries with more, maybe even a assigned female at birth, but nevertheless non-binary identifying individuals who inhabit masculine spaces and have some of these qualities, as well as men that do. And I know men who are heterosexual and cis, but still inhabit more feminine spaces. So there's a disconnect between the gender and the sex for a second. But I think the key elements of masculinity that pop up again and again for me personally, and I do see sort of when I'm talking to my male friends about this, or my masculine friends about this, is the capacity to provide shelter and care. And by that, I don't mean necessarily being the breadwinner. And in my domestic relationship, my nesting relationship, this is an interesting discussion we're having at the moment where I find that some of the struggles and financial struggles of sharing things over the next 5 to 10 years is something that my nesting partner is in a better capacity and a better profession to cover those elements of financial cost.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, I would say that in many aspects of the day to day, I take on a higher percentage of sort of certain types of caregiving and provision,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in the specifics of this would be things like food planning, cooking. My partner is wonderfully skilled in many things, but is not skilled in the kitchen at all. Should be kept away from knives because they're likely to hurt themselves, and they'd be the first to admit that. But certainly, caregiving or provision, I think, is a key element. Creating a protective and safe space as an expression of strength, I
Mm.
think is really really important. I think too, and this is a really interesting concept as well that I've been playing with. I think there is something irrevocably connected between masculinity and violence. And that's something that's really a difficult and uncomfortable thing to talk about because I also look now more directly at my particularly sadistic side, but also just broadly the practice of BDSM generally, as an expression of consensual violence.
Mm.
In the same way as I would look at, so I'm also a martial arts practitioner, uh, and I look at, I've actually had to reframe my understanding of violence to inhabit that as well. When you walk into a dojo or you're sparring with someone, that you are training, practicing, and displaying violence. And I think there is something connected between masculinity and violence there that needs to be not just acknowledged, but deliberately shaped to a positive outlet.
Mm.
And martial arts and is a fantastic example of how one can do that. I think even if you look at some of the roughest sports, like I don't know if you've ever seen AFL's the easy one for Australians, but also if you've ever seen European handball played,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite it can get quite rough and tumbly. So I think there is something quite masculine about violence as well. The question is, how do we shape these kinds of things in a way that creates that, like I said, that kind of positive script, that way where you are helping rather than hurting anyone in any of those kind of domains. And I think that the final thing for masculinity, for a positive script on, or a positive attribute to masculinity, or an element there, I think is, this is the one I'm sort of struggling with the most. But there is a certain sort of assumption, I think, of a certain amount of power running through this. And this is something I'm still sort of trying to work out
Mm.
what that means, because it's not power over someone, but the relationships between providing care, strength, protection, violence, all of that sort of fits in a sort of power dynamic or power kind of bubble, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying. That's the thing I think I'm struggling with, being comfortable even talking about. And that's probably a good sort of segue too, because that's something I'm very comfortable talking about when I'm in a kink negotiation, or
Mm.
in my, my nesting partner and I have a color dynamic as well. There's lots of spaces where I'm very comfortable talking about that. When I start connecting it to masculinity, you can probably hear it in my voice now. I'm starting to choose my words really carefully. I'm being very
Mm-hmm.
toey, and it's not so much how it'll be perceived by your audience. That's actually an internal thing. I'm shying away from that part of myself
Mm.
because of the negative associations and all of the toxicity that is very well out there, very very well recognized, how terrible outcomes these can be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is still something there that is inherent, and it doesn't have to be bad. There are ways we can shape this in a positive way, but it's very hard to engage with it when you're shying away from it. You know what I mean?
Mm. So why do you think more people aren't talking about the positive elements of masculinity? Is it because there's been such a focus on the toxic elements that people are just scared it's going to turn into that conversation? Or do you think there's something else at play here?
I think there's a couple of things at play.
Hmm.
I'd like to acknowledge that it is very difficult to raise this conversation in the uh, current environment. I think
Hmm.
I don't think that's deliberate. I think that's a consequence of the damage that men have done
Hmm.
over generations, and there is absolute that like it should always be raised in a way that does not step on the voices, particularly the voices of women who have been hurt,
Hmm.
which is, statistically speaking, most women in some way.
Hmm.
I I do think, however, though, it does make it harder because there's the entire discourse is primed for reactivity. If you are seeing, and because there have been a lot of bad faith actors or a lot of men trying to reclaim the old ways, if you like, or who inhabit or are uncomfortable with losing the toxic elements that they've nevertheless enjoyed some privilege from, there's a reactivity there that makes it very hard to speak up about these issues,
Hmm.
as particularly as a man. And as a queer man, like this month is two things. We're in June. It's two things. It's Pride Month, and it's also Men's Mental Health Month. And as a queer cis man, that's a really awkward space for me to inhabit because I feel like
Mm.
I've got so many things I want to talk about right now, and some of them I'm really comfy talking about. If I put on the rainbow bear for a second, that's easy. But if I want to put on sort of more of the grizzly bear mask, as I call it, that becomes a bit harder.
Mm.
And I feel like there is less space for that. I think the second element, though, is that much like it always needed more and more women at the table and women leading the change for feminism, I think that a narrative of positive masculinity has to come from men.
Of course. Yep, I
And
agree.
we're naturally taught not, well, not naturally, but sorry, we're socialized not to talk about our feelings.
Mm.
I think individually, a lot of men are unsettled or scared,
Hmm.
not necessarily in any sort of like, what are you scared about? But just, it's an unsettling time to try and think about these things.
Mm.
And we haven't been socialized from a young age to talk about these things. We've been socialized not to. So you're dealing with adult men, sometimes well into their 40s or 50s, trying to engage with these topics. And that there are not a lot of resources and not a lot of tools for them to do so. And they've never been shown how.
Mm.
And I think that makes it very hard.
Hmm.
I think that's an issue that I think needs a lot more airtime in the general discourse. I think there needs to be a lot more patience shown to men struggling with trying to find their way to talk about this because, even if you're looking at an archetypal 55-year-old bloke trying, who's always kind of dependent on these core basic scripts of heteronormativity, male breadwinner, male privilege, uh, trying to undo those and trying to find what he wants to be, he's also never had the tools to do so. So if he messes up, he's a first year apprentice to lean on some pretty big
Hmm.
tropes here. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's never done it before. So I think that's a big barrier alongside the fear of being called out or creating a combative discourse when you're trying to create a collaborative one. I think one of the biggest issues is that we don't have those tools. And even, I do have an academic training in sociology. I do have an academic background in dealing with uncomfortable topics. So I do have some of those skill sets. And, I wasn't necessarily, like I said earlier, wasn't necessarily raised with those deliberate inputs of don't talk about your feelings, men don't cry, all the rest of it.
Hmm.
And I still struggle with them. So
Mm.
I genuinely don't know how you can accept for putting your own voice out there as best you can and supporting the voices of those around you. I don't know how you can make a sort of more dramatic, widespread change. I think people are trying, and the conversations are starting to happen. But yeah, I think those are some of the big barriers, if you like.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think speaking up about it and telling your story is one of the ways forward. So thank you for that and being so vulnerable as well.
One of the reasons why I signed up.
Mhm. Okay. And you mentioned that you're also teaching a series at the moment on power exchange, which sounds incredible. Is that a course that you only teach in person or is that available online as well?
It's not online. It is a 12-part course.
Hmm.
Um, would you like to hear the 12 parts?
Sure.
Okay, so the first one was on equality versus equity, meaning that most people are very strongly driven to try to establish a relationship in which equality is the primary focus of the relationship, whereas I prefer to think of things in terms of equity.
Mm.
What you get out of the relationship is as important to you as what I get out of the relationship. So even if we're in a power exchange in which we're not equal, what we get out of it, the value of what we get out of it is equal. So that was number one, was equality versus equity, which is a big one for me.
Mm.
Second one was talking about value and the value that you bring to a relationship. Then the third one was finding a great relationship and how you might go about doing that. Four was taking it slow, and that specifically is about the concept of three collars. Um, I don't know how it works in the world in general, but here in this area, most of the masters that I know follow a principle of giving a slave a prospective submissive or slave, a collar of consideration, followed by a training collar, followed by a final collar. And that slows the whole process down, gives people time to develop a better understanding of each other, what they're both looking for in the relationship, that kind of thing. Then I move on to the four areas of negotiation. That was number five. Number six was the three slave responsibilities. And then number seven was slave rights, what the three rights are. Number eight was power exchange contracts. Number nine was what is it that makes a good dominant.
Mm.
Number 10 is my power exchange relationship has issues. What do I do? It's just because you're in a power, you've found somebody in BDSM doesn't mean it's going to always work out perfectly, and sometimes you have to work through those issues. The most recent one, number 11, was everyone is in a power exchange. How is that possible? And then number 12 is life after death, supporting the survivor, which is coming up next month.
Mm. That's so important.
And some of those, well, yes, because if you're going to be not just a dominant, but an owner of property that is human, then you have to follow the four levels of priority, which are the slave's needs absolutely must come before all other things. And that's got to extend over into death. You have to care for your property both in life and prepare for your death, so that they're properly prepared for that as well.
Mm.
The four typical priorities are needs of the slave, needs of the master, wants of the master, wants of the slave. So way down on the bottom is the wants of the slave, way up at the top is the needs of the slave.
Mm.
And of course, my slave wife and I will sometimes argue about whether a thing is a need or a want. Yeah, I'm sure you can see that has a great opportunity for conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned a few labels there. They all sound somewhat submissive. Are you a submissive person?
I would have said, like a lot of guys, if you'd met me when I first got into the scene,
Mm-hmm.
I would have said that I'm dominant, because that seems to be the thing that's modeled to all of us, that men are dominant, women are submissive,
Right.
at least in the first kind of instance. But a lot of my earlier experiences all tended to end up circling around my own submission or something along those lines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm still unpacking that one a little bit myself. So.
Okay. You've also said that you want to help people who are at the beginning of exploring themselves. Why is this?
Yeah, so I don't claim to be like an expert on any of this, but I think that there's probably a real lack of safe spaces for male presenting or male identifying people to talk about their submissive side or their softer side, or however you want to describe it, their more vulnerable side, in a way where it's actually accepted. My experience overwhelmingly within the kink community over the years has been that there's still a lot of hugely heteronormative things that come up, where a lot of men are in a position where they have to either stick to some very classic, quote unquote, normal masculine kind of presentations of themselves, or strictly identify as queer, which for some guys is probably a bit of a complicated thing because they might not necessarily be as interested in that or willing to kind of have that label put on them. So I guess what I'm kind of trying to say here is that there's a lot more room for the nuance that a lot of guys might be feeling while they're trying to work their way through all of this, and that you're not alone, and that that it's all right to be talking about all of this stuff, and I would hope that they'd have people around them who have who can support them, and if not, that they can seek them out, and because I think there's a lot of like internalized kind of angst, and in my experience at least, a lot of angst about where men are meant to fit into kink, especially because kink is quite so often aligned with, and rightly so, with queer culture and counterculture and all that sort of stuff. Coming to it as a quote unquote relatively straight white guy, it's pretty easy to feel like you're an imposter, or that like your perspective hasn't got anything unique to share with the rest of the community because you are such a default.
Right.
Yeah. It's I guess I'm just, and please don't think I'm trying to be like like men's groupy kind of any of that toxic.
No, you're not coming across like that at all.
No, okay. I think there's room for a bigger discussion about how to be like a better kind of male presenting person in kink, in a way that's respectful of everyone else, obviously, but also respectful of your own place in it, as to sort of reduce that the cognitive dissonance that can come along with all of this stuff as you're trying to figure out where you fit. I'm, as I said, I'm in my mid-40s. There's part of me that regrets that I couldn't get on board with all of this stuff sooner, because I've missed some experiences I could have had in when I was younger, when I had a little more energy and a little bit more kind of ability to stay up all night, frankly. I could have got into this a lot sooner if I felt like the community was there that would have accepted the things that I was trying to find out about myself. But at that time, it wasn't the same. We're talking like 10 years ago. It just wasn't as acceptable to be involved in kink. It certainly wasn't as though I knew a lot of people outside of going to specific kink events. Like, we didn't hang out anywhere else but those. That's changed quite a lot in the last few years. I now know a lot of people. I actually can't stop running into people who are somehow involved with somebody who is somebody I know through somebody who is either someone, me, or the woman I'd been in an open relationship with have had some kind of interest in or some kind of dalliance with, or someone that they've had a dalliance with. Like, it's quite a small world when you start looking at it all. And that kind of support structure, that kind of thing wasn't there for me, years ago. So
very well said. So What would you like to see more of in the scene? How do we allow more and more space for this nuanced masculinity? I've had questions from men for the podcast. I think I asked on last week's episode. There was a submissive man that was asking for a femdom to explain how she viewed his masculinity because he was struggling with being a submissive man, but also maintaining his masculinity, almost like being submissive meant that he was weak. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
this might be part of what you're kind of getting into here. So how do we
A little
allow
bit.
space for more of this nuanced masculinity, that masculinity can be submissive and it doesn't mean that it's weak?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, first of all, obviously that stereotype doesn't stand up to a lot of scrutiny.
No.
It only feels the way that you're describing there, where it's oh, I'm weak. If you want to go with like the heteronormative kind of standards,
Mhm.
right? But if you really, really want to get into it, and you hear this more in the conversation that a lot of female presenting submissives will have, that their submission is a gift, that their vulnerability is something that they are entrusting to someone else, and that there's a lot of strength in that,
Mhm.
right? That it actually takes a lot for someone to let down their guard and be honest about what they want in that kind of way, and to be so trusting and to be also just so forthright with what they want, but also comfortable in that.
Mhm.
There is a lot of, stereotypes or, archetypes about men have to be the strong, silent type. You don't get to talk about what's wrong. You don't get to talk about your feelings. You don't get to talk about anything you want because that could be used against you. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that would need to be questioned and broken down. It's not it's not wrong to want the things that you want. It's not wrong to ask for them, respectfully,
Mhm.
obviously. It's not wrong to ask questions. It's not wrong to seek out a peer group of people who've maybe had similar experiences to you. I mean, I don't know that there is anywhere near as much support for submissive men as there is for submissive women
Mm.
in general. I mean, I couldn't speak to it because I'm not a submissive woman, but it does feel like there's more acceptance of that, probably because it fits into that weird hetero binary of men are masculine, women are submissive by default. So it's probably just a little easier to kind of, for a lot of people to wrap their heads around.
Mhm.
Submissive men, on the other hand, it would feel as though, well, I mean, reflexively, you could say any guy who's looking to be submissive is, it might be supposed that there's some kind of pervert, which is just completely wrong. Or at least if you are, then everyone is, if you want to get into it.
Yep.
And then beyond that, you've also got issues around, what does a submissive masculinity even look like?
Mm.
Is there room for a strong kind of submission? Like, how do you do that? What does that look like? And I'm not saying I necessarily have the answers to that, but I think that these conversations need to be had, and there isn't enough sort of peer-led stuff around this at the moment, as far as I can tell, or at least I'm not finding it. So,
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I know of quite a few men that are teaching dominance. I don't know if I've seen any submissive men teaching how to be a submissive.
yeah. Well, I mean, so the other part of it is, and this gets into crosses over into things around sex work and other stuff like that, which is absolutely fine. It's like sex workers absolutely work. There is no question about that. It's a great thing to be doing if it's what you want to do. But there is this thing that happens with a lot of submissive guys who are looking for femdom, where they are treated as though the only path for them is through some kind of financial arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
That it either needs to be a fin-dom scenario, which I'll be honest, my experience with that is mostly people just trying to take advantage of that. I'm sure that there are genuinely some really great femdoms out there who can do it in a respectful and fine way, but more and more, particularly on dating apps, you're just seeing like an absolute deluge of very quickly and hastily thrown together profiles that are literally just there to try to get money out of men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really discouraging and makes me, I don't know how other guys feel about it all the time, but makes me feel like I've been commodified, and as though there's something wrong with the things that I want. So the only way that I could get them would be to purchase them.
Mm.
Right? Which is, it's cheapening the experience, but it's also making any guy who wants that kind of thing feel potentially really low and shamed about what they shouldn't be shamed about. It's this weird thing. It happens quite a lot. I mean, I've given social media and stuff a break for a little while, but when I was on dating apps up until a couple of months ago, I would be matching with people who would make the minimum amount of effort to ask me questions about myself, and would essentially just be trying to set up either an OnlyFans subscription or whatever else, or just flat out saying you have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you're actually looking for somebody who you can trust to have this kind of dynamic with, is incredibly, incredibly frustrating.
Yep.
And I do recognize that women on the internet get inundated with dick pics and idiots saying stupid shit and being disrespectful. I recognize that. But there are plenty of us guys who aren't that,
Mm-hmm.
who, if you actually got to know us and sat down and found some common ground, would actually be, amazing people to be around.
Mm-hmm.
I think so anyway.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to put together some kinky speed dating virtual events, because I recognize the need for something
absolutely
different, a different space for kinky people to meet that's not necessarily a kink event.
I mean, munches are also great. Like, nothing wrong with a munch. That they're really good too. Unfortunately, they nearly always turn into sausage fests, and there's still the same issue with the default submissive woman, dominant man kind of thing that comes up a lot.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question about what it's like being a submissive man in kinky spaces. So obviously I've never had that experience of entering a kink event as a submissive man. What is that like? Do you feel like you're able to speak to other submissive men or seek them out, or is it more of like a lonely experience? Do people come up to you? What happens?
I think that in general, well, it depends on whether or not you've already got some people with you to kind of help break the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Showing up on your own, I would consider it to be a relatively okay experience for me now, but I can remember when I was younger that I found it quite intimidating. I do remember a lot of people feeling as though, a lot of feeling that there was an expectation that I should behave in a particular way. And a lot of that was yet again very kind of heteronormative. There were a lot of guys who I'm sure I probably could have had a great conversation with, I don't know, at the footy or on the bus or whatever else, who were in quote unquote dom mode and would not have spoken to me in the same way or felt comfortable talking to me at all. There is still like a weird kind of misogyny in that anyone who identifies as submissive must then automatically be weaker or less than or do something to indicate to other people in the scene that they're what's the word I'm looking for here? Like that they're taking that role, that they're being submissive, even though like there's literally absolutely no reason why someone can't be completely forthright, confident, strong-willed, give as good as they get, and also have a submissive side. There's kind of like a weird expectation that you're going to match type, if you know what I mean. And I think that also generally makes it just a bit harder for men in general to talk to people just out of hand without being scrutinized in terms of, oh, well, yet again, it's like I was saying with the dating profile stuff. When you're a guy in that scene in the like at a kink event, whether it's provocation or something else, people look at you a certain way when you're a man, and if you start talking to people, they look at you as though, oh, are you safe? Are you saying something that I'm interested in? Are you wanting, like, are you just being like a sex pest, or is this flirting, or is this just genuine friendliness? And there's all these presuppositions that appear before you get to the point where you just accept it as an equal or as like a safe person to talk to. Now, I completely understand that there's lots of people who are more cautious in the scene because they obviously don't want to, be hassled, basically. But that's also very, very off-putting and intimidating for a lot of men who would like to be able to feel comfortable enough to be themselves, their submissive selves, if that's what it is, but also their full selves in that kind of environment and not feel like they have to play to type or to be a certain kind of way to be accepted.
So what would your advice be to a submissive man that's thinking of going to their first kink event?
God, I wish there was a simple answer to that. I think that if at all possible, try to reach out to people on, FetLife or any other sort of kink things, and try to find some people who are, quote unquote community leaders, or are running the event even. So go to whoever it is that's running the event and just explain, I'm new, I'm a guy, I'm submissive, and I'm not sure where I'm going to fit into this. Is it okay if I come and say hi to you? Would you feel comfortable with introducing me to some people that you think might suit? Not that every event manager wants to have to be like a matchmaker or anything like that, but I would assume, and I would tell me if I'm wrong here or what you think, that part of the creation of these kinds of communities in those events is to facilitate that. And if you're someone who's running it and you've got regular people who come in all the time who are the right kind of people to introduce to new people who are safe and friendly and will get people feeling comfortable right away, then yeah, of course you want to introduce them if you can, and then see where it goes from there. I recognize that it's really hard to walk into a room and just start up a random conversation with a person. who might be there looking for something completely different than what you are. And there is a little bit of a quote unquote meat market kind of mentality that comes in when there are people who go into these things with hooking up in mind, and are assessing everyone through that lens. And that's not necessarily the same as wanting to meet people and have genuine conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to get up there and get into it with people who are receptive to that kind of, I'm just meeting you for the first time, let's talk about anything at all, not necessarily it doesn't have to be the classic ASL section sort of questionnaire. What are you here? What's your name? Who are you here? What are you here for? Kind of thing, which you do still see a bit. It can be a lot more nuanced than that if you wanted to take the time to try to find some people who can help you facilitate that. Like I would say even go along to the event with the intention to just meet some people.
Yep.
Not anything beyond that. Just go along and try to meet some people and try to make that happen through the organizers as well if they're open to it. If they're not, well, that would I probably say that it's not a great event if they don't care about that kind of thing. But go to it with that kind of mindset. Very relatively low bar for entry, right? Don't make it so. Don't say you're going to go and you're going to meet someone, you're going to hook up, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that. Just go along with, I'm going to have drinks in a room with a bunch of people who are all going to be dressing according to whatever they want to say about themselves and express about themselves, and I can do that too.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also, it's okay just to go and have a look as well. You don't have to take part.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You don't have to talk. You can just be an observer in these places. And a lot of people do just enjoy watching. You know, there is a kink that's called voyeurism. It's all about just stepping back and watching. So people will just assume that's what you're doing. If you want to do that in the space for the first time, then that's perfectly okay as well. Passionate about separating healthy BDSM from toxic masculinity, and you speak about the red pill movement. Where do you see people getting it dangerously wrong when they confuse dominance with control or abuse?
Okay, well, very specifically, let's boil these terms down. Okay, so yes, the red pill movement, which I was just referring to that.
Yeah.
This concept that men are inherently better and women are second-class citizens. It's just, I would use a lot of foul language here, but I'm just going to summarize and just use the word stupid. Those guys are going to fail. They're going to have terrible relationships, and the women are going to leave them. Daphne and I enjoy sometimes going on to Reddit, and there's relationship advice columns, and we read them. Sometimes we jump in and answer them because we do this for a living. And it is every single time that you read about someone in one of these red pill relationships, it always starts the same story. He started off as such a nice guy, then he got into this whole red pill movement, and now he's abusive, and he talks down to me, and he doesn't treat me well. So the best way I can describe this, the one that I've been teaching for years, is I want everybody listening to think of the story of Alice in Wonderland. And in Alice in Wonderland, there is a chapter, it's the beginning of the second book, called Through the Looking Glass. In fact, it's the name of the second book. There is an actual looking glass, as described, over the mantelpiece of the fireplace. And when Alice looks into this looking glass, in the normal, mundane, vanilla world, she sees a grandfather clock, a table, some chairs, the flowers outside the window, and she knows that a nice man is going to deliver her mail. When she steps through the looking glass into Wonderland, which is the fetish Wonderland, the kinky Wonderland, the grandfather clock talks and gives advice, the tables and chairs dance, the flowers sing, and the postman is a giant lizard. This is the best metaphor that I can give you, anybody, for the idea that what we do in the BDSM world, it may look to somebody uninitiated and clueless like activities from the mundane, from history, from horrible periods of history, where a master and slave was not something that was a good thing. Slaves were not consensual. There's no consent. There was no negotiation. They didn't have a choice. Masters were abusive, crazy people who thought that their slave was a thing, objectified thing. And we're not talking in a fun, kinky way. We're talking in honestly, that's how they felt. And they see the wrong side of the looking glass and they think that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about that. And if you're a red pill guy who thinks that what BDSM is, you're wrong. Flat out wrong with a capital W. The fetish wonderland, the kinky side of the looking glass, every single act is an act of connection, ideally, and love, affection. You are trying to give something. It's an act of giving. You're trying to give an experience to the submissive. If you are a dominant in a relationship with a submissive on the fetish side of the looking glass, they are the most wonderful thing in your life. And hopefully you are their most wonderful thing in their life. And you both build this. You have an organized set of rules that has been carefully talked out and discussed. And I hope you guys, you red pill guys are listening, agreed to enthusiastically by both sides with absolute, undeniable, overt spoken consent. If that is not there, and you are trying to force somebody to be a submissive or force them to be lesser than you or squash them down or tell them that they're less of a person because of their gender and that's the only reason, not because they actually did anything wrong, they're not a criminal, they didn't do anything wrong, you're just saying that because they're gender, they're less person, then the person making those comments is, and this is me being very nice about it, clueless. So that's but I just want you to know I don't feel strongly about this.
Very well said. Thank you.
I actually, Daphne and I many moons ago were asked to speak to a group. It was a guy that I knew through a very roundabout set of circumstances, and we were asked to speak to a group of men. Now, if anybody here knows what the Iron John movement was, the Iron John movement was back, I think, in the 80s. And it was based on a book called Iron John by Robert Bly. And it was all about the idea that men could be sensitive. You're still a man if you cry. You're not suddenly less of a man. It was very anti-toxic male. It was very much about men opening up to other men and talking about their feelings, which was, such a big deal. So there was like retreats and stuff for this Iron John. They call them Iron John retreats. And so we were asked to speak before a group of men. And for some reason, I thought it was an Iron John kind of thing. And so we get there, it's about a dozen guys, and we're talking to them. And they're asking me all kinds of questions, very nice guys. And they're asking me all these questions about domination, submission. And I'm telling them. And then one of them says, do you think that men are naturally better dominants? And I laughed and I said, oh, hell no. I said, some of the best dominants I know in the world are women, powerful women, amazing. And I told these guys, I said, listen, if you want to be a great dominant, you look at the art of domination. You don't look at the person who's doing it. You look at their art, whether they're male, female, or otherwise. And a couple of them nodded their head, and we finished our talk and we left. And, they said they might have us back, and they never called us back. And to this day, we're pretty sure it's because they were one of these red pill groups. We didn't know this. And Daphne was like, you know what? I got a bad vibe from those people. Even if they do call us back, I think we should say no, thank you. And so I'd like to think that in that group of those dozen guys, a couple of them had a wake up moment and stopped being part of that group.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
A tradition that we have on this podcast is sourcing a question from one of the listeners. And the listener today asked something that I'm sure many other listeners are wondering. They say, one thing I'm always curious about with 24/7 master-slave dynamics is how much autonomy and personal responsibility does the slave have? Do they maintain their own career, finances, schedule, friendships, etc.? Are there any realms of life that are outside the sphere of influence of their master? In what ways do they express their independence and personality outside of the dynamic?
Okay, this is not going to be a short answer. I'll tell you that right now. So first things first, one of the big myths one of the big falsehoods that is running around the globe is this mistaken concept that the only good DS is 24/7. Completely not true. Okay. 24/7 domination, submission, 24/7 master slave, mistress slave is something that two people work towards. It is the black belt of submission, dominance, and submission. You don't get there overnight. Anybody who wants to start and just getting started and they try to jump into 24/7, I promise you will fail. I promise you. I'll put it in writing. I have put it in writing. 24/7 is not for everybody. What you can do is you can be play partners with somebody for as long as you want, where it's very non-committal. You meet at the club, you play. Maybe you have a date here or there, but it's very non-committal. You can go on to becoming someone's dominant and they're submissive in many forms. It can be exclusive. It can be poly. It can be all kinds of things. But still, you're just dominant and submissive. You haven't taken that leap into master and slave 24/7. Once you both feel, first of all, both people have to be into it. If one person's into it and the other one's not, it will fail. Promise you. Once you know both people are really into doing the 24/7, the next thing you do, which you've already been doing, hopefully, is you'll sit down and you'll have a seriously thorough negotiation. You have to talk about all the things you just mentioned. You have to talk about career needs. You have to talk about other members of the family that may come around or be involved. You need to, and time that they may require. You need to talk about, what are your own needs as a submissive? Do you need creative time? Do you need video game time? Do you need TV watching time? And everything gets discussed. The great rule of BDSM in the biggest umbrella possible is open mouth, move jaw up and down, push air up through your lungs, past your vocal cords, make sounds, talk extensively. Vanilla people have a bad habit, not everybody, of course, of sweeping things under the carpet. When you step into the world of DS and BDSM, those days are gone. Those are now your shoes that you have outgrown and they don't fit anymore. You cannot do that anymore. You must talk. You must communicate if you're going to be successful at this. So you have this negotiation. You talk about everything. Every single thing that you listed in that question is something that you would discuss. Now, I have known submissives who absolutely want to be at the beck and call of their dominant every waking second. That fulfills them. That makes them happy. Believe it or not, they have to find a dominant who wants that very overarching, constant responsibility to be attentive. I consider that personally micromanaging. Personally, I, Master Arcane, want my submissive to have fun things they do in their life and fun things they do in their free time. I may insist on healthy practices, hitting the gym or engaging in exercise, eating healthy foods, keeping the junk food down to a minimum. These may be some of my rules that I impose, but I also will be the one to acknowledge, hey, you know what? It is the unfortunately used extensively in the movie The Shining, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Weird time to quote that, I admit. But anyway, the point is still there that you do have to have time for relaxation. On the Crow Academy website, when I was describing the second Crow Academy, I even said, we encourage that. We encourage downtime. It doesn't mean that in a 24/7, you don't step out of role. There's 6 levels of being in role. This is all detailed in the book, Igniting the Fire, The Art of Romantic Submission. The 6 levels of being in role go from the most intense, deep training time where nothing else is involved. It is very focused, and the etiquette from the submissive to the master should be impeccable. And then it kind of goes down levels, like how should a slave behave at a party? How should a slave behave when it's a lighter condition, but you're at a DS event like the Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco, where it's kind of lighthearted? How can a slave behave around the house when they're just doing their thing? You're getting ready for dinner. You're going to watch a TV show. I strongly recommend that masters and slaves, mistresses and slaves go to the movies together, eat popcorn, and tell stupid jokes. It's important to have this sort of stuff. Underneath every single element of being a dominant, being a submissive, being a master, being a mistress, being a slave, being a switch, underneath all of that, we are all normal human beings. We might be really cool at what we do. We might be very talented at what we do, but there's the human level that is undeniable. And if you try to create a completely two-dimensional 24/7 relationship that you read about in a book, and you try to deny the basic human level, basic human needs, the ability to be, the importance of being happy, etc., there are going to be failures, guaranteed. So this is very, very important. So for example, my personal orientation towards it, number one, the health of my slave is very important. But I also have learned over years that lead by example. So I will sign myself and my slave up for the gym. We will rent bicycles together. Today, Daphne went on to this really intense exercise class that I tried and I just didn't enjoy it. So I didn't go with her today. But overall, we work out together. She might do different things in the gym because she has different goals. When we go shopping in the grocery store, we kind of help each other out to make healthy choices. I have personally taken on myself to teach Daphne all about classical music because I love classical music. So we have games. We'll be in the car. I'll put on the classical music station. Somebody will come on and I'll say, who is this? And see if she can name the composer. We talk extensively. One thing that Daphne and I very much that, two peas in a pod is that we have so many things we like and are excited about that we always have something to talk about. We were in the car driving through New Zealand for 5 months, and I don't think we had a single day that wasn't full of conversation in the car. So all of these things are super important. And if you're going to be a 24/7 master and slave, you have to discuss all of this, everything. You have to, and if new stuff comes up, that's okay. And it will probably happen. There'll be something you didn't cover because you're not perfect and you didn't think of every molecule in the world. Then you talk about it. If someone has a hard limit about it, you need to mention that and bring it up. If it's flexible, you need to figure out where those boundaries are. I actually do have another part in my book that talks about the importance of a submissive feeling affectionately free. You wouldn't want to trap your submissive, who's your partner perhaps in life, in a 24/7. You wouldn't want to trap them into feeling like they could only give you a kiss or squeeze your hand affectionately with your permission. That's creating a barricade against affection, against connection. You don't want to do that. You want to leave the affection and connection channels open. It's okay as a dominant, as the master, as the mistress to say, hey, I really appreciate how affectionate you are, but when I'm on a phone call with an important client, that's not the best time to try to tackle me on the couch. You can make these little rules as they come up. But the important thing is you got to, as 24/7 master and slave, mistress and slave, you're still seeking happiness together. And I've also said that your day-to-day compatibility is important. If one person absolutely loves science fiction movies and the other person absolutely hates science fiction movies, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. But if one person, is a hardcore vegan and talks down to non-vegans, and the other person is, a former cattle rancher's daughter, as Daphne actually was. I was not a vegan, however. You're going to have to reconcile that. I actually did have a slave who was not a vegan. Way back many moons ago, I was a vegan. And so we had to sort of figure out how the diet would go at home. But these are all things you figure out along the way. And it is okay for the dominant, for the master or the mistress to make rules on the fly like this, but they need to be down to earth. They need to be grounded in reality. They need to take into account real life events and real life changes. And, just keep it grounded, keep it based in real life. And remember, the goal is still, even as the most hardcore master slave, I consider Daphne and I to be pretty high up there in terms of how intense we get. But it is still extremely, very much a very, very loving relationship aimed at our mutual happiness.
Thank you for listening to the Erotic Realm. If this episode stirred something in you, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a rating, or write a review on wherever you're listening. It helps more people find the show and brings visibility to this deeper conversation about eroticism and self-understanding. I'd also like to invite you to dive deeper into the psychology of desire, including my writing, research, and upcoming courses over at psychologyofdesire.com. And if you want the full experience, join thousands of curious minds on my Substack at psychologyofdesire.substack.com. This is where I release the Psychology of Desire case files, behind-the-scenes thoughts, and intimate reflections every week, plus more. Until next time, stay curious, stay embodied, and keep exploring. Also, as always, stay perverted.